Last summer, a ton of people pulled a drooping clematis straight out of the ground and threw it in the trash. And chances are, you were one of them. You're kicking yourself over the wasted cash, thinking you completely screwed up. But the truth is, that plant wasn't even dead. You just threw $40 down the drain in the middle of the summer heat. Look, I know exactly what you've been doing. In this scorching weather, you've been out there every single morning checking the moisture. You did everything the tag said. And then out of nowhere, your clematis just droops sideways like it quietly decided to give up on you. Meanwhile, your neighbor, the guy who forgot he even had a clematis, his wife ran the lawnmower straight through it last season. Cut it down to basically nothing. And this summer, it came back. It's climbing his fence post, wrapping around his porch light, and completely taking over. He didn't treat it, he didn't feed it, and he didn't do a single thing. So what is actually going on here? Why does it feel like the harder you try, the faster it dies, while the guy who does zero work gets an unstoppable machine? Clematis is not a fragile plant. We are fragile gardeners, panicking at the wrong moments, spending money in the wrong places, following advice that sounds correct but quietly works against us. Today, I'm giving you 5 hard truths that most gardening content will never say out loud, because they contradict the products on the shelf and the advice on the tag. By the end of this, you'll know exactly why your plant keeps failing, what to fix this week, and why the very first thing you need to do is throw that bottle of fungicide in the trash. Let's get into it. Secret number 1, and this one is going to make you feel a little bit cheated. You walk outside one morning with your coffee in hand, and there it is, a perfectly healthy stem, just lying sideways, collapsed overnight. The leaves are already starting to go limp. Every instinct tells you disease. Every gardening forum tells you clematis wilt. The books have a whole chapter on it. It sounds serious and looks like something you need to spray for immediately. Here's the truth. Most of the time, it is not wilt. Before you reach for any product, before you do anything, get down on your knees and look at the base of that collapsed stem. Look right at the soil line and inspect the bark, because about 50% of the time you are going to find a tiny scrape or a rough patch. You'll see a small nick in the soft green tissue. And that mark was not made by a fungus. That mark was made by a slug or a snail or a rabbit that came through your yard in the night. It barely grazed the stem with its teeth and just kept moving. That's it. That's your whole disaster. A snail that weighs less than a nickel did more damage than any disease could have. And here is what matters most when that stem collapses. Whether the cause is actual wilt fungus or a slug or anything else, the roots underground did not die. The roots don't care at all. They are sitting under the soil, completely intact, waiting. Clematis roots are stubborn in a way that most people never discover, because most people make the same mistake at this exact moment. They pull the plant up and throw it away. Do not do that, because that is the single most expensive mistake you can make with this plant. The top growth is just temporary anyway. The roots are the real engine room. Chop the top, save the roots, because that's all that matters. Pick up your shears and cut the collapsed stem straight down, close to the soil. Clear the debris away completely. Bag it, remove it. Don't leave it sitting on the soil. And then walk away and leave the plant alone. In a few weeks, sometime sooner, something small and green is going to push up through the dirt, right where you cut. New growth will appear because the roots never stopped. The roots were never the problem. Now here's where it gets interesting, because that slug problem, that snail problem, it doesn't just happen randomly. It happens because of something specific that most clematis guides actually recommend. Something you probably did because every article, every forum post, every YouTube video told you it was the right move. You put mulch or gravel around the base. You made a nice tidy ring of something to keep the roots cool and shaded. And honestly, that rule is 100% true. The advice isn't wrong. It's just that the way we try to follow it usually blows up in our face. Because congratulations, you just built a 5-star luxury resort for slugs and snails. Literally, you gave them room service. You created a dark, cool, moisture-holding environment right at the base of the most vulnerable part of the plant. They moved in immediately and started to breed there. They feed at night while you sleep. You wake up the next morning and you think you have a disease problem. You don't have a disease problem, you have a hospitality problem. You made the conditions perfect for the exact creatures that are destroying your plant. So what do you do instead? Here's the part most people never hear. Don't use gravel and don't use mulch. Use a living plant instead. Specifically, plant something living around the base of your clematis, something that spreads low and full enough to shade the soil and keep it cool. Salvia is the classic choice. Hardy geranium works beautifully too. Both of them spread wide enough to cast real shade on the root zone. Both of them keep the soil cool without creating the kind of dark, damp, enclosed environment that slugs and snails love. And here is the second reason this works better than any mulch. Salvia has a sharp, slightly medicinal herbal scent that it puts off. Slugs absolutely hate it, and rabbits avoid it. The same property that makes salvia smell good to you makes it completely unpleasant to the animals that were dismantling your clematis stem by stem. One plant, two problems solved. Cool root zone check. Natural pest deterrent check. There is no gravel to shift and no mulch to replace. There is no need for slug pellets when you have salvia doing its job all season. That is a tool nobody sells you in a bag at the garden center, but it works better than anything that comes in a bag. All right, secret number 3, and this one involves tomatoes. If you've read any serious clematis guide, not the beginner stuff, the detailed guides, you've probably seen the advice to plant your clematis deep, specifically to bury the root ball several inches below the soil surface, sometimes up to 6 inches down. The logic is that burying part of the stem encourages the plant to push out extra roots along the buried nodes. That gives you backup and a built-in redundancy if one stem collapses. The logic is completely sound. The execution is where it goes wrong. When you dig a straight vertical hole 6 inches down and drop a root ball straight into it, you're placing those roots into soil that is colder than the surface. It drains differently than the surface and holds moisture in a way that can work directly against establishment. The root ball sits in a kind of cold, underground pocket. It is very slow to warm up in spring. Sometimes it sits in water that pools at the bottom of a deep, narrow hole. The plant stalls sometimes for an entire season. Here's the better way. Think about how serious tomato growers handle this exact same problem. Tomato growers figured out decades ago that burying stem nodes creates a stronger root system, but they don't dig straight down. They dig sideways. They lay the plant in at an angle, sometimes almost horizontal. This ensures the buried stem runs through the warm, active top layer of soil, rather than plunging down into the cold zone beneath it. Do the same thing with clematis. Tilt the root ball to roughly 45 degrees when you plant. The nodes along the buried stem still develop extra roots. You get all the benefit of deep planting. But the root ball itself stays up in that warm, rich top layer where the soil actually has some life to it and drains properly. The plant pushes roots faster. It establishes in weeks instead of months. And it goes into its first winter with a root system that is already significantly more developed than a plant that went straight down. It is a small adjustment with a completely different outcome. Now secret number 4. And this section is for anyone who has ever moved into a new house with an established garden or inherited a clematis from a previous owner. Or honestly, anyone who bought a plant lost the tag 3 days later and is now staring at a vine with no idea what it actually is. Clematis has 3 pruning groups. Group 1 blooms on old wood. From last year, you cut it, you lose the flowers, period. Group 2 blooms on both old and new wood, light pruning only. Group 3 blooms entirely on new growth. It produces this season. Cut it hard, almost to the ground every late winter, and it comes back stronger every single time. Cut a group 1 like a group 3, and you get nothing. Do it 3 years in a row, which happens more than you'd think, and you start to believe the plant is broken. It isn't broken, you just kept removing the part it was trying to bloom from. So, how do you figure out which group you have when you don't know the variety, the name, or the origin of the plant? Do not go down the internet rabbit hole. Do not spend 2 hours on gardening forums trying to match leaf shapes to photos. Put the scissors down and do nothing for 1 full year. Just watch the plant and note exactly when it blooms. That's it. That's the whole test. If your clematis opens flowers in April, sometimes even late March, before most things in your garden are awake, that is almost certainly a group 1. Don't cut it, basically ever. A light cleanup after flowering is the maximum intervention it needs. If it blooms in early to midsummer on vines that clearly overwintered from last year, those stiff brown stems that you maybe thought were dead but weren't, that's group 2. Prune it lightly in early spring, just to tidy it up. If the blooms don't show up until late summer on growth that the plant produced this very season, fresh, green stems, new from the base, that is group 3. In late winter, cut it down hard. Leave it just 6 to 12 inches above the ground. It will push back with more stems and more flowers than you left it with. You don't need the Latin name. You don't need a plant ID app. You need one full season of paying attention. The plant will tell you everything. Time is the test, so let the calendar be your guide. Pay attention to this next part, because this is the secret most people never discover, and it's the one that ties everything else together. Secret number 5. And this one isn't about how you plant or when you cut or what you put around the base. It's about what's underneath all of it. It's about your soil, specifically your soil's pH. Here's a scenario that happens all the time. You have a clematis that looks pale and grows slowly. It stays small when it should be getting aggressive. It gets hit by wilt more than it should. And you've been feeding it good fertilizer, potassium, phosphorus, the stuff that's supposed to drive flower production and root strength. You follow the directions and apply it on schedule. And yet, the plant stays weak. The nutrients are there, but the plant isn't using them. Why? Because your soil is too acidic. Clematis needs soil that is neutral to slightly alkaline to thrive. In acidic conditions, and a lot of garden soil is acidic, especially if you see moss creeping in around the base, or if you're working with soil that has a lot of pine bark, peat, or heavy organic matter. The root system physically cannot take up the nutrients that are sitting right there in the soil. The chemistry doesn't work, and the uptake pathways close. You are feeding a plant that cannot eat. And here is the darker part of that acidic soil, is also a significantly more welcoming environment for the wilt fungus we talked about in secret number 1. So you end up with a plant that is both nutritionally starved and more vulnerable to disease at the same time, even though you've been doing everything you thought was right. The fix costs almost nothing. Every fall, once a year, that's it. Scatter a small handful of agricultural lime around the base of the plant. You can work it lightly into the top inch of soil if you want to, but rain will carry it down on its own. Agricultural lime shifts the pH gradually over several seasons, from acidic toward neutral and slightly alkaline. It doesn't add nutrients. It does something better than that. It unlocks the nutrients already in the soil. It makes the environment one where the plant can finally feed itself properly. A clematis growing in correct pH with the right companion plants around its base, planted at the right angle in soil its roots can actually use, that plant does not need you hovering over it. It does not need weekly attention. It does not need fungicide or slug pellets or expensive soil amendments reordered every spring. It grows aggressively and blooms reliably. It survives cold winters, accidental mowing, drought, and neglect. There are clematis plants in old British cottage gardens that have been climbing the same stone wall for 40 years. They outlived the people who planted them. They survived everything. Because the foundational conditions were right from the beginning, and then the plant just did what clematis always does when you stop working against it. It takes over completely. So let's put all 5 together one last time. When a stem collapses, don't assume disease. Get down and look at the base. If you find physical damage, a scrape, a nick, cut the stem to the soil. Remove the debris and leave the roots alone. They will come back. Replace the mulch and gravel around your plant with companion plants that do both jobs at once. Salvia or hardy geranium, shade the roots, repel the pests. No products required. When you plant, don't go straight down. Go in at 45 degrees. Keep the root ball in the warm zone. Let the buried nodes do their job without burying the whole root system in cold, slow soil. If you don't know your pruning group, don't guess. Watch for 1 full year. Let the bloom timing tell you which group you're dealing with, and then act accordingly. And every fall, 1 handful of agricultural lime. That's your long game. Cheap, simple, and the thing that makes everything else actually work. Next spring, your neighbor is going to be at the garden center again, buying a replacement, because the one he had didn't make it through the winter, or it never came back from whatever happened last summer. And your plant, the one you maybe thought was dead, the one you almost threw away, is going to be doing something quiet and relentless in your yard. It will be climbing and spreading everywhere, covering the fence, wrapping the post, filling in the gaps you forgot about. Not because you worked harder, because you stopped doing the wrong things and let the plant do what it actually wanted to do all along. That's what a clematis is. It's not some delicate, high-maintenance diva. It's a tank. A flowering, unstoppable 40-year machine, if you give it the right foundation and then get out of its way. Now I want to hear from you. Has your clematis ever been cut to the ground by a lawnmower, by a hard winter, by a rabbit, by an accident, and then just come back anyway? Bigger than before, refusing to quit. Drop it in the comments below. I read every single one, and I never skip a story.